بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. بسم الله. Okay, so we were speaking about the way to break down categories of words. We are interested in the chemistry of words and how words come together. In order to talk about the chemistry of words, we have to talk about the categories of words. When we talk about the categories of words, you say, how do you distinguish one word? How do you ascertain which category a word is in? So we mentioned behavioral signs, how it interacts, things like nida. You could say, oh Zaid, ya hadha, for example. But you couldn't say ya yaf'al. That doesn't make any sense. So yaf'al is a verb. It is not a noun. Okay. So then we're talking about behavioral signs and verbal signs, like the word that comes before, etc. So it's فعلامة الاسم الخفض نحو بزيد والتنوين والألف. Um, having a tanween, we spoke about that last week. And we saw some scenarios where a tanween might appear, for example, on a verb like لا نسفعن, right? In Surah Al-Alaq, نسفعن. So the words ends in a tanween because it is actually a noon at-tawkid al-khafifa, nasfa'an, with a noon with zukun. So it's written as a tanween, but it's not actually a tanween. Similarly in Surah Yusuf, وَلَئِن لَمْ يَفْعَلْ مَا آمُرُهُ لَيُسْجَنَنَّ وَلَيَكُونًا مِنَ الصَّاغِرِينَ. Right, it's written as a fatha tanween, or an alif tanween, but it is not actually a tanween. Well, alif or lam, and we said, well, sometimes you could have an alif, a lam before a sentence or before a verb, meaning alladhi, but that's not so common. فعلامة الاسم الخفض نحو بزيد ونحو واللام الغلام، وحروف الخفض نحو من الله وبالله وعلى الله وإلى الله. وعلامة الفعل قد نحو قد قام. We said قد is for تقريب and تحقيق. It doesn't mean that it happened or it will happen. It means that it is for finality. So قد قامت الصلاة, that means the prayer, not the prayer has been established, but the prayer is about to be established, and that is finalized. Um, uh, what was it? قد قامت الصلاة. قد غربت الشمس. The sun. That's it. The sun set. The sun has set now, meaning it is setting and it's unavoidable now. So it's so close, it's unavoidable, as if it's done. وقد, right? And it comes with تقليل and تكثير with a فعل مضارع. It could be قد يأتي زيد, means Zaid may come. وقد يأتي زيد, Zaid may well come, right? So it can be for both. والسين نحو سيقول. والتاء التأنيث الساكنة نحو قامت. وياء المخاطبة مع الطلب نحو قومي. So here, for example, we have a really weird verb like تعالى. تعالى means come. So does تعالى mean came? Like you say تعالى زيد, which means Zaid came. When you say تعالى يا زيد, that means come here. But do you say تعالى زيد? And إن زيدا سيتعالى, Zaid will come. So it's a really weird word, right? It's a really weird word, ta'ala. So usually we put it in the category of a noun. Call it ism fi'al. Call it a noun, ta'ala. But don't we say ta'alay and ta'alaw, right? So it's kind of somewhere in between. Arguably, ta'ala is a verb, and arguably it is not. Um, Nazali, Nazali, or Sharabi, or Dhahabi. So you get a verb that's on has three root letters. It's a what's it called? Form one verb like Dhahaba, Shariba, Nazala, Yanzilu, etc. And then you put it on the pattern Fa'al with a kasra on the end. That means inzil. Nazali means inzil. Sharabi means ishrab. Do you say sharabi, sharabu, or how does that work? Similarly, halumma. Do you say halumma for everybody? Or do you say halummu, halumma, halummi, right? Which means come as well, right? So these are certain words that are kind of in between. Is it this category or that category? وعلامة الحرف ألا يقبل شيء من ذلك. So these are behavioral, right? Behavioral things, right? Okay, what about usage? What about its not behavior? These are verbal things. It doesn't have seen and so forth before, etc. But behavioral things are more important with a harf. So for example, how do I know that the dhamir al-fasl is not actually a dhamir, is actually a harf? So when I say Zaydun huwa al-fadilu, that's called dhamir al-fasl. It splits the definite subject from the definite predicate. So I look at it and I say, what are you actually saying? I'm saying Zaydun al-Fadilu. Okay, why did you use huwa? So, well, I'm not trying to emphasize him. I'm trying to like split the two words apart. Okay, splitting words apart, that's very particle-ish of you, right? That's a very kind of particle thing to do. And so then we ask this word to say, what is your mahal? Right? Zaydun huwa al-Fadil. Or kunta anta raqiba, right? Kunta anta raqiba, right? So kunta anta raqiba, this anta that's between kunta and al-raqib, this zaydun and the huwa that's between zaydun al-fadil, what is its mahal? It has no mahal. So that's a problem. Because if a noun has no mahal, it is not a noun. A verb might not have mahal, it's true. But a noun that has no mahal, you know what that's called? That's called a harf. That's what it is. That's called a harf. So here, there's no sign, but it's behavior, right? The way it's acting as a harf. So it is a harf and it's not a noun. Okay, let's answer the adhan. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة الصلاة القائمة آت سيدنا محمد الوسيلة والفضيلة والدرجة في الرفيعة وبعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته إنك لا تخلف الميعاد رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم نبيا ورسولا. Okay, so he says that makes sense to everybody, inshallah. Okay, great. So then he says ثم اللفظ قسمان مفرد ومركب والمفرد ثلاثة أقسام اسم وفعل وحرف والاسم ثلاثة مظهر نحو etc. So now we can break down other ways of how in chemistry we're talking about, okay, you have an element and you have a compound and you have a mixture, right? So compound, that's one thing. It's not the same as a mixture, right? So here, this is what we're talking about now. So it says ثم اللفظ قسمان مفرد. Okay, mufrad meaning here we're just dealing with one word. We're not talking about it's singular or not. Or we're just talking about that it's one word. ومركب, composite. So what is this composition? This composition of words. Okay, composition of words. It has three things. It has word one, word two, and the added meaning that the specific type of relationship has added to the word. Okay, so let's look at Kitab wa Zaydin. What is the difference between Kitab and Zayd and Kitab wa Zaydin? Say, well, Kitab by itself means book. Zayd by itself means this individual that we all know. Kitab wa Zaydin means quite a lot of things. It means book, it means Zayd, and it means that belonging is happening, and that belonging is being done by Zayd and done to the book, right? So it's almost equivalent. It's almost like adding in a verb, right? It's almost like saying ownership is happening. It is being and a book exists. A Zayd exists. A book exists, and ownership is happening between the two of them, and is happening in this relationship. Quite a lot of information through Kitab Zaydin. So when you do tarkib, right? When you put together, right? When you put together these words in a particular tarkib, in a particular composition, that you have what's called word synergy. Word synergy. You have more than the sum of the parts. Does that make sense? Kitab wa Zaydin has more meaning than the meaning of Zayd and the meaning of book combined. Okay? Similarly, if I said رجل كبير. Kabir means something that is big or old. Rajulun means a man. But kitab, but now I'm qualifying it. So I'm adding, so they're saying a man who is qualified by being this and who is not small. Right? So when you put words together in a sifa mawsuf relationship, mawsuf tarkib tawsifi, you're saying more than you would say with the sum of the parts. Right? Mubtada and khabar. Zayd, Amr. Okay, I know who Zayd is. I know who Amr is. But you didn't know that Zayd was Amr. Oh my God. Zayd is Amr? Oh my God, I didn't realize that. So you're saying much more with the construct than you are saying by itself. Right? Clark Kent is Superman. Right? For example. ثم اللفظ قسمان مفرد ومركب والمفرد ثلاثة أقسام. So now he's going to go through. So we can put that to the side, murakkab, right? So words coming together with word synergy, words by themselves. والمفرد ثلاث أقسام اسم وفعل وحرف والاسم ثلاثة مظهر نحو زيد ومضر نحو أنت ومبهم نحو هذا. So it is either مظهر, obvious. You've told me the name. So he gave the word Zayd. It's not the best example to use. If you use the word book, it'd be a bit better because Zayd is a proper noun. Okay, which is fine. It is a proper noun, but mudhar is a word like book, for example. Rajul, right? Do I know what you mean by it? Yes. Mutmar means loaded, carrying something. So if I don't have any context, like I need more to understand what anta is than something else. I can use it. It's quite a useful word, but if I don't know who you're talking to, then I don't know what anta means, right? So it needs a context, it needs a siyaq, right? For which reason it is needs something, for which reason it is mabni. So the ism mudhar by default is not mabni, but the ism mudmar, right, the dhamir is by default mabni because it behaves like a harf in that it doesn't really convey its meaning fully without other things. ومبهم, vague, نحو or نحو هذا. So this is mubham and it needs you to explain it. I need to point at something. Point at this and point at that. Now I know what هذا means. But if I don't know what you're pointing at, then I don't know what this or that is. Okay? والفعل ثلاثة أقسام ماض نحو قام ومضارع نحو يقوم وأمر نحو قم والحرف ثلاثة أقسام مشترك بين الأسماء. It's used for both. والأعفاء نحو هل ومختص بالأسماء نحو في، ومختص بالأفعال نحو لم. right. والمركب ثلاثة أقسام: إضافي كغلام زيد، ومزجي كبعل بكة، وإسنادي كقام زيد. Right? When you put things together, you could be isnadi, you're making a statement. Or it could be mazji, you're making a new word. Right? Ba'la bakka is two words merged together. So that's you've made a new word. So hydrogen and helium, is that right? I actually never studied this at school anyway. But isn't helium made out of hydrogen? So it's not a hydrogen, it's not hydrogen bound connected to hydrogen, right? But in nuclear fusion or whatever inside stars, or I don't know the details, right? Maybe somebody can ask Sheikh ChatGPT very quickly, right? But it's like that. You actually made another atom, right? You've actually made something else. Its composition is made out of hydrogen, jazakumullah khair, right? So that's like Ba'alabaka, Hadramaut, right? Ma'adi Kerib, right? You've merged two words together. It is essentially one word. It is one word, and it is a mufrad, right? It's a mufrad. Excuse me. It is not a sentence, right? So isnadi, that's putting words together to make a sentence, right? X is Y. Is X Y? X happened. X didn't happen. These are sentences. Right? But otherwise, you have things going like that. كقام زيد ثم الاسم قسمان معرب ومبني. It is expressed. أعرب. It is expressed or it is built. مبني, right? مبني with a shadda. معرب, expressed, meaning it goes through different changes and there's an expression of it, right? May Allah protect us all. There was a baby that didn't cry. And they realized later on why the baby didn't cry, because it was no point in crying. So the baby originally used to express its sorrow, its pain, its need for help by crying. But then it never received an answer, so it just gave up. Like it would be hungry, but it wouldn't cry. It would be in pain, but it wouldn't cry. It would be lonely, but it wouldn't cry. Right? May Allah protect us all. Anyway, so that's mabni. You go through different stages. Things are happening to this thing, but it doesn't express anything, right? Certain metals, for example, or certain things that don't expand very much, right? So usually solids, right? They will, they expand when you heat them up, right? But they expand in different ways, right? And different things. But something that I was trying to think of example. Okay, in a certain temperature, right? So I get water. Water in our normal interaction with temperatures goes through these different states, right? We see it in its solid form, we see it in its liquid form, we see it in its gaseous form, right? So that's mu'rab. It is expressing the fact that it went below zero Celsius or went above. It went above 100 degrees Celsius or below. It's expressing these things. We can see it. Mabni, here's a piece of iron. Right? It's not really, that's not a perfect example, but a piece of iron in our world, normal day-to-day life, a piece of iron does not change. It gets hot, it's the same. It gets cold, it's the same. You don't say, oh, the iron froze, right? That's not a thing that you normally say, right? Because in the normal interaction with iron that we deal with, the normal person, it's just fixed. It's not changing, right? So it's going through the changes. It is getting hot and cold, right? But there's no sign of it. That's mabni. So it has something's happening to it. It is changing, but there's no sign of it. It's fixed in one place, as opposed to mu'rab. That is expressed, right? There's i'rab. There's expression. A'raba means to express, right? Uridu an u'rib an shukri. I want to express my gratitude, right? U'abbir. But u'rib is something else. U'abbir is a different word, but an u'rib, right? والمعرب ما تغير آخره بعامل يقتضي رفعه أو نصبه أو جره. right? It's changed by virtue of the fact that something is doing something to it. Be that عامل تقديري or be that change تقديري, right? So here's a word. There is some rafa' happening to this word. There is some nasb happening to this word. There's some jar happening to this word, right? But sometimes the amil is muqaddar. Like when you say Zaydan, Zaydan, which means look out for Zayd, look out for Zayd, right? احذر زيدا أو عليك احفظ زيدا or something like that. So there's an implied verb, right? So that's also there's an amil that is muqaddar, it's implied, that's doing amal, and you can see it. Or the taghyir is taqdiri, like جاء زيد, مررت بزيد. So I said, when you said جاء زيد, مررت بزيد, didn't you say the same thing? I said, yeah. So then how did it change? Oh, that's because you didn't hear the ending. Okay, when would I hear the ending? Well, if I didn't stop on the word Zayd, you would hear Zaydun and Zaydin. Okay, so but when you just said جاء زيد, مررت بزيد, and you put a full stop, how is there a change? Oh, I mean, an implied change, right? There's a change that you would have heard had I continued the sentence. Okay, so that's also mu'arab, right? It's also mu'arab, but it's called mu'arab i'raban taqdiriyan, a theoretical i'rab. Or هذا بيتي ومررت ببيتي وَرَأَيْتُ بَيْتِي. So the word bayti is theoretically going through the changes of fatha, dhamma, kasra, but it's just hidden for pronunciation reasons. So it's still mu'arab. It's not mabni. Okay? So والمعرب قسمان ما يظهر إعرابه وما يقدر. It's apparent, obvious, and then implicit. فالذي ظهر إعرابه قسمان: الصحيح الآخر كزيد، وما آخره حرف يشبه الصحيح نحو دلو وظبي، right? والذي يقدر إعراب فيه قسمان: ما يقدر فيه حرف وما يقدر فيه حركة. So it's going to be implied حرف or implied حركة. فالذي يقدر فيه حرف جمع المذكر السالم المضاف إليه المتكلم في حالة الرفع، فإنه يقدر فيه النحو جاء معلمية. My مسلمية. You could just say مسلمية, my Muslims. It's a bit of an odd example, but let's say معلمية. My teachers came. So you should say جاء معلموية. معلموية. So معلمون, noon is dropped because of إضافة. معلموية. And then we have ooya. You can't have ooya. So because of the sound problem, we're going to change the ya, the wow, sorry, into a ya. Mualli mi ya. Do idgham muallimiyya. Muslimiyya. Right? Mudarrisiyya. Okay? Um, so in that situation, the wow is muqaddar. So we're going to say mu'al or muslimi فاعل مرفوع وعلامة رفعه واو مقدرة منع من ظهورها اشتغال المحل بحركة المناسبة. Right? I don't think we use the word حركة المناسبة. So usually we use that word for like baiting, but the point is there's مناسبة, right? منع من التلفظ به, like we can't pronounce the wow. للمناسبة وقلبت ياء للمناسبة. It changed into a ya للمناسبة. مناسبة, the sound had to go together. So this word is not مبني, it is معرب, but معرب إعرابا تقديريا. Okay? Um, Uh, I think of another example like this. That's the only example I can think about. والذي يقدر فيه حركة قسمان ما تقدر للتعذر. It's impossible. You couldn't ever do it. It's actually impossible. كالفتى, right? وغلامي. So we call this usually munasaba, not ta'adhur. I'm not sure why he's using a different term here. He's calling غلامي ta'adhur. It's not really muta'adhir. We call it munasaba usually. But you can look at it in different ways. So fata, it is the impossibility. Muta'adhir, mustahil, istihala. The impossibility of pronouncing anything on an alif. Alif is a vowel. You can't put a vowel on top of a vowel. So you can't say fata, like there's nothing you pronounce. So when you have a word ending in an alif, it is you have تعذر منع من, you say وعلامة رفعه أو علامة جره أو علامة نصبه فتحة مقدرة منع من ظهورها اشتغال محلي بحركة منع من ظهورها التعذر, right? This is called تعذر, right? Words ending in alifs. And then munasaba, here he puts it as ta'adhur, but غلامي could make it munasaba, because you could say غلامي, right? Or غلامي, or غلامي, you could say it. It's not impossible, right? But it's not munasib. The sound is not munasib. So we're going to say the same thing. حركة المناسبة منع من ظهورها, the reason why, the thing that has stopped the appearance of the fatha dhamma kasra is al-munasaba, right? Or harakatul munasaba, the letter that we put in there, we put a kasra that goes with a ya. وما تقدر للاستثقال كالقاضي, right? So this is not impossible, but it's just weird, right? So you say al-qadiyu, no. Al-qadiya, yes. Al-qadiyi, no. Okay, why do you say qadiyi? Is it muta'adhir? Is it possible? No, it's just weird. Al-qadiyi. Okay, what about al-qadiyu? What's wrong with that EU? Why can't I say EU? Right? Qadiyu. So yeah, Arabs don't say that. Why? It's not a sound that exists. Okay? But it's not impossible. That's why you find some Arabs do pronounce it. And some Arabs as well, they will just drop it even with fatha. They say Ra'itul Qadi, right? Ra'itul Qadi. Yeah, because it's heavy to say. It's difficult, but not impossible. Istithqal, right? So we call it الثقل, right? So we're going to say جاء القاضي. القاضي فاعل مرفوع وعلامة رفعه ضمة مقدرة منع من ظهورها الثقل, right? الثقل. Similarly with a verb, right? لم إنه إن الله لا يرضى عن كذا, right? لا يرضى. So we're going to say لا يرضى فعل مضارع مرفوع وعلامة رفعه ضمة مقدرة منع من ظهورها التعذر. You couldn't say راض. You can't put a ضمة on an alif. It's impossible. يا رب. ما تقدر الاستثقال كالقاضي. And then what? What we're talking about right now with a verb, يرمي. So إن زيدا ليرمي. Right, you can't hear the dhamma. So it's also going to be الثقل. والمبني قسمان ما تظهر فيه حركة البناء وما تقدر فيه. Right, so the same thing. So this is kind of theoretical. This is useful. And so we can add to this as well al-waqf, right? So جاء زيد, الحكاية, right? رأيت زيدا. من زيدا, right? Should be man zaydun. But I said, who's this quote Zaydan guy, right? So that's also another reason. So you could have hikayah, you're quoting somebody. You could have waqf, right? Ja'a Zayd. So it ends in a sukoon, right? But it ends in a implied dhamma, right? You could also have mujawara. Mujawara. Like alhamdulillahi. So why do you say alhamdulillahi? Well, because there's a kasra and there's another kasra, so I just made the first word have a kasra because it sounds nice. Alhamdulillahi. Right. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahu. Right. Alhamdulillahi. Alhamdulillahu. You can do both. Or right. Um, it's kind of like, giving harmony to the words. So one i'rab, not necessarily the relied upon i'rab, but one i'rab of the verse, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق وامسحوا بوجوهكم وأرجلكم إلى الكعبين. Right? So that qira'ah would, the zahir of that qira'ah would mean, and wipe your heads and wipe your feet. وأرجلكم kasra because of the ba. Wipe your heads and wipe your feet up to the ankles. So, what was I going to say? So here one i'rab is okay, it has a kasra on arjulikum. Okay, why is there a kasra on arjulikum? Simply because there's a kasra on wujuhikum. It just sounds the same. So it's kind of like a an acceptable mistake, if that makes sense. Right? It's a mistake that we do enough that's okay. Right? Um, there's another i'rab of it as well, another way of analyzing it as well. Was that the grammatical reasoning that Imam Kisai used? I don't know. If you put that in the group, I can look it up and see if he actually mentions that. I have the tafsir of Kisai somewhere around here. I was teaching it before, and I have it on YouTube. Um, so we can try and look when he said that. It's just a very small work. It's not really a book in reality. It's just kind of like quotes. But yeah. Okay, so anyway, taqdeer al-bina, that's a bit weird, right? So we're saying this word doesn't really have an important ending. The ending that it has on it has nothing to do with the change. So why do you really care about having an implied mabni ending? Say, well, just for the sake of it. Say, okay, like what? Like limanil mulkul yawm. Limanil mulkul yawm. So man is mabni on what? Mabni al sukun. Okay, but you said manil mulk. Ah, yeah, it's mabni on an implied sukun. Ah, okay. Well, why is it implied? Oh, iltiqa sakinain had to, wouldn't didn't sound right. Okay. So والمبني قسمين ما تظهر فيه حركة البناء وما تقدر. فالذي تظهر فيه حركة البناء نحو أين. Right? وأمسي. And in reality, again, all of these words with a waqf. إلى أين full stop. Okay, مبني على الفتحة المقدرة. Right? رأيته أمس. أي أمسي مبني على الكسرة المقدرة. Right? حيث. والذي تقدر فيه حركة البناء نحو المنادى المفرد المبني قبل النداء نحو يا سيبويه ويا حذامي. Right? So تقدر فيه حركة البناء نحو المنادى المفرد المبني قبل النداء. So this word was mabni before you even ever used it. Okay? So we're going to say, you said ya Zaidu, ya Amru, ya Khalidu, ya Sibawayhi, ya Hadami. So Hadami mabni ala al-dhamm al-muqaddar. Okay, what's the point of it being dhamm muqaddar? It's like, well, it's theoretically what it is. It's kind of just a technical thing. Like, what does that mean? That's like saying, for example, um, I'm gonna judge all of you on how much equivalent of a yen you have. It's like, well, what's the point of that? I don't have any yen. So, well, it's interesting, right? Judging people in terms of their biomass, right? There is a value. You could give somebody a mass of the chemical potential energy of their biomass, right? So instead of looking at you in terms of your height or your name or your weight or your nationality, I'm going to look at you in terms of the number of joules that you are walking around with, right? So what's the point of it? It's a good way of analyzing things, or right. So that he's not trying to be useful or trying to solve a problem. It's just kind of practical, that theoretical. والفعل قسمان معرب ومبني, right? So the issue with an ism is the default with an ism is معرب, because the ism goes through lots of different things. You change things a lot, and you need to know what's going on. So if I said جاء زيد, what does that mean? What does جاء زيد mean?
Zaid has come.
Could it mean something else? What if I change it from زيدون to زيدو? جاء زيد. What would that mean? جاء زيد. جاء, comma, يا زيد. What does that mean?
Yes, come Zaid.
Exactly. So I said the same verb, جاء زيد, right? But one I'm saying Zaid came, the other I'm talking to Zaid and I'm telling him that someone else has come. So the default is nouns. They move around a lot. They're very itinerant in their meanings. The way that they use them, they're going from here to here to they need to move around a lot, right? And so we have to be careful with them. Is this the object or is this not the object? Is it this or that? And so it's actually it is linguistically economic, right, to invest in putting more symbols, right? Zaydu, Zayda, Zaydin, Zaydis, all these things. It's useful. It's useful. With the verb, most of the time, the verb is just the verb. You don't need to do things, right? And there are some scenarios with the mudari', for example, where we see, oh, you do mean different things, right? So the default with the noun, because of لِوُرُودِ كَثْرَةِ الْمَعَانِ عَلَيْهَا, it's doing lots of different things. We need to have it, we need to change, right? Versus the verb, it doesn't really need to do that. So the default in a verb is that is mabni, and the default in a noun is that is mu'rab. It says وفعل قسمان معرب ومبني والمعرب المضارع المجرد من نوني الإناث والتوكيد, right? So the default then is verbs are mabni with the exception of the mudari', and that is a specific type of mudari' that doesn't have the noon al-inath يجلسنا تجلسنا النوني التوكيد, right? يكتبن تكتبن. In reality, there's a certain category of verb of fi'l mudari' that has noon at-tawkid and it's still mu'rab, as we shall see. So he says والمبني الماضي اتفاقا والأمر مبني على الأصح, right? Everybody agrees that the madi is mabni, right? But what about the amr? So the Basri, the Kufiyin, they say, what are you talking about? The amr is the majzoom, right? You say litajlis ya Zaidu means ijlis. So ijlis is just a shortened version of litajlis. Oh, so it is actually majzoom. Yeah, look at it. It looks majzoom, right? Majzoom means cut off. You cut the ending off the amr. That's what it is, right? So that is the sign of it, right? It's nothing else. والأمر مبني على الأصح, but the Kufi, the Basriyun say no, it's mabni, and there are three categories of verbs: present, so mudari' and madi, and amr, and that's something else, right? The Kufiyun, they say, no, it's just a type of mudari that's majzoom, right? ثم المعرب من الأفعال قسمان ما يظهر إعرابه وما يقدر فالذي يظهر إعرابه الفعل المضارع الصحيح الآخر right so يجلس right والذي يقدر إعرابه قسمان ما يقدر فيه حرف وما يقدر فيه حركة so there's going to be an implied حرف and an implied حركة فالذي يقدر فيه حرف الفعل المضارع المرفوع المتصل به واو الجماعة أو ألف الثاني أو ياء المخاطبة إذا أكد بنون توكيد نون بالنون right so you say thing it gives example here فإنه يقدر فيه نون رفع نحو لتبلون so لتبلون لتبلون uh, الفعل المضارع المتصل به نون واو الجماعة والألف واللام والياء المخاطب so he's saying فالذي مقدر how is that even مقدر تبلون that's why yeah so the wow is dropped here لا تبلون the wow is dropped that's why right ولا تبلوان ولا تبلين so this should be تبلين 2 years تبلين 2 years okay so the yeah is dropped but that yeah okay so these are not 100% examples because they kind of sound like they're talking about one thing, but they're talking about something else. So what is the issue here? The issue is with the af'al al-khamsa or the amthilat al-khamsa, which are yajlisuna, tajlisuna, yajlisani, tajlisani, and yajlisna. Sorry, and tajlisina. These are the ones that end in ani, una, and ina. Okay. What's important about these verbs? These verbs indicate their rafa' state with the noon, and they indicate their nasb slash jazm state without the noon, right? So I say tasfikuna marfu' tasfiku majzum or mansub. تجلسين مرفوع تجلسي مجزوم or mansub. Okay. So he's actually talking about something else. I'm not sure why he uses these examples, but anyway, not to worry. So we have words that end in una or ina or ani. These are verbs. We come along and throw in the nuna tawkid. What happens? Well, nuna tawkid means you're going to add another 2 noons at the end of the verb. So you're going to have something like this. تجلسونن تجلسينن or تجلسينن تجلسانن. And then what happens is the Arabs come along and say, Habibi, you have way too many noons. 3 noons right next to each other. That sounds really weird. Okay, so what am I going to do? Drop the noon. Okay, so I say tajli sunnah, which becomes tajli sunnah. Tajli sinna, which becomes tajli sinna, which becomes tajli sinna, right? Tajlis nani, tajlis nani, with the that's something else. Yeah, yajlisani is our dual. So what we've ended up with is added 2 noons and dropped the original noon. So now the thubut noon, which was the sign of the rafa', and the hadf noon, which was the sign of the nasb and jar, is now theoretical, right? It's theoretical. It's like I'm going to take something away that you don't have, but I'm going to state that I've taken it away, even though you don't have to give to me, because that's important. That statement is important, right? It's like politics. So there's a noon that is theoretically there and it's been taken away because there's too many noons. It sounds funny. And then you're going to drop that noon that isn't even pronounced. Or you're going to keep that noon that isn't even pronounced. Right? That's the point there. As for what the examples he's using here, it's slightly different. That's slightly different. It's not. It is happening, but he's trying to explain these examples are examples of something else, which is what do you do if it ends in a or e, whatever. But this is so those verbs. So those verbs that end in una, ina, and ani. When you put the noon or tawkid, the noon disappears, and it's being present or absent is theoretical, is muqaddar. Does that make sense?
ماشي.
Yes, Husseini, Azhar, Muhammad, Nanat.
Yes, Sheikh.
Okay. It's funny because where do we do that all the time? We do this with money, right? So what used to happen is I turn up with a bunch of hides and I say, "Give me rifles," right? I turn up with a bunch of water buffalo and say, "Give me rice," or "Give me something," right? When we used to barter, right? And then we went to currencies like gold and silver, etc. And then we have nothing. I theoretically owe you money, and here's a number that represents it in some database, right? That's how we work today, right? Which is the same kind of, that's what's happening. Right? So, but the point they're trying to make is the word is not mabni, right? The word is not mabni. That's what we're trying to say. So we're not saying it's mabni. Why are we saying that? Because we're saying the default in verbs is that they are mabni. But the default in the fi'l mudari itself is that it is mu'rab. Okay, great. So therefore what? Therefore, we're going to keep to that default as much as possible. So if there's any way that we can ascribe the apparent bina in a phonological way, saying, oh, it's a pronunciation issue, we will do that. That's what we're trying to say. That the default is this word is mabni, is not mabni, right? And we're not going to say it is mu'rab. We're not going to say it's mabni. We're going to say it is a theoretical sign, as opposed to wallahi la tajlisanna, right? It should be tajlisu, but I said tajlisanna. Why? There's no pronunciation problem here. So here we're going to say this is mabni. So usually if the noon tawkid is attached to a fi'l mudari, it becomes mabni, but not with the amthila al-khamsa. Not in these examples. Here it's noon al-jama'ah. Here it's noon it's the no, that it's not noon al-jama'ah. It's called we call it the noon al-jama'ah. It's the noon that goes with taf'aluna and yaf'aluna. And the noon that goes with taf'alani, yaf'alani. Do we call it the noon al-jama'ah? I don't think so, if I remember correctly. Noon al-jama'ah. That's like the noon of I don't remember that term as a noon al-jama'ah. Wallahu a'lam. Oh no, we do. Noon al-jama'ah, we use that for like for Muslimuna, I think. Does that make sense, Husseini? So Husseini, you were messaging me privately, by the way, so you can just put it in the with everybody else, so that everyone else can see it. Okay. So anyway, the point is it has a theoretical noon that is either there or not, and so it still has a state and is still mu'rab according to the Basriyin. Says والذي يقدر فيه حركة قسمان ما تقدر تعذرا, it will be impossible like يخشى, وما تقدر استثقالا كيدعو ويرمي, right? يدعو, that's awkward. يدعو, so I just say يدعو, and it has a ضمة مقدرة منع من ذهولها الثقل or اشتغال المحل بحركة الثقل, right? ويرمي, you don't say يرمي, right? والمبني من أفعال قسمان, مبني على الفتح كضرب ومبني على السكون أو نائبه. فالأول كاضرب، والثاني كأغزو واخشى وارمي وقولا وقولوا وقولي. That's easy, right? والحروف كلها مبنية. Okay? وهي why is it مبني? Because إعراب is that I do something to you, I punch you and you fall over, I heat you up and you expand, I take your money away and you sue me, right? There's some kind of amal and there's a behavior. There is no amal on huruf to begin with, right? There's no amal on huruf to begin with. So of course they're not going to express anything. Of course they're not going to express anything. So it says وهي أربعة أقسام مبني على السكون نحو لم نحو لم، ومبني على الفتح نحو ليت، ومبني على الكسر نحو جيري، ومبني على الضم نحو منذ. Right? And so here then the grammarian is going to have to explain what's going on. Right? Why is it like that? Okay? So مبني على السكون, default, that makes sense. Okay, fine. مبني على الفتح. Well, if it just said late, wouldn't I have iltiqa sakinain? So yeah. Okay, if I said laytu, would that be a bit weird? The dhamma doesn't really go with the yeah. So okay. Okay, what about latey? Kasra is kind of heavy and you have a yeah before, it's kind of difficult. Why don't you say later? Kaifa, right? That's easier. That's the normal kind of sound. Later, kaifa, right? Aina. Right, notice that's a kind of quite a normal trend. So putting for just pronunciation reasons, putting on a fatha, it's easier than having iltiqa sakinain, and it would go nicely because there's a yeah before it, and we see that sound a lot. Mabni al kasr, that's not so common, right? Maybe something like B, right? Or li, right? Jayri, it's kind of different. Why do we say jayra? No idea, right? But it happens. Mabni al-dam is usually going to be for itba'. So mundu, right? What about haythu then? Right? That just exists. Haythu, why is it mabni al-dam? Don't know, right? But the point is they will try and find some kind of explanation for it, right? If the default is sukun, etc. والبناء لزوم آخر الكلمة حالة واحدا لغير عامل. وأنواع البناء أربعة: ضم وكسر وفتح. فالسكون والفتح يشترك فيه اسم والفعل، والحرف والكسر، والضم يختص بها الاسم. So you don't have a verb that's مبني على الضم. والحرف ولا يدخلان فعلا. الإعراب تغيير آخر الاسم والفعل المضارع لفظا أو تقديرا بعامل ملفوظ، you've said it، أو مقدر, as we have already explained. وأنواع الإعراب أربعة: رفع ونصب وخفض وجزم. فالرفع والنصب يشتركان في الأسماء والأفعال, as we know. والخفض يختص بالأسماء. Now, key concept, the word nasb often means having a fatha, right? So we will find in books, you're reading Fathul Bari, you're reading this tafsir book, and it's like nasb, and you're like, nasb, right? It means having a fatha. Okay, so there is this. So the grammarians, they treated the nasb of a verb and the nasb of a nasb of a verb and a nasb of a noun as the same because they both have fathas. But in reality, they're totally different, right? They're totally different, right? So they're just both called nasb because they have fathas, but by default, but they're totally different things, right? Similarly, rafa' it has a dhamma in yajlisu and zaydun, but they're totally different amals in reality. The one does amal to a verb, does not do amal to a noun. It's not the same thing at all. والجزم يختص بالأفعال. ومثال دخول رفع في الأسماء والأفعال نحو زيد يقوم. فزيد اسم مرفوع بالابتداء، ويقوم فعل مضارع مرفوع بالتجرد. تجرد meaning it's not being affected by anything. ومثال دخول النصب في الأسماء والأفعال إن زيدا لن يضرب. فزيدا اسم، زيدا اسم. Notice how I'm doing connecting the two. زيدا اسم منصوب بلن. It's just a typo here. ويضرب فعل مضارع منصوب. No, where are we? Oh, sorry. بإن وزيد فعل مضارع منصوب بلا. ومثال اختصاص الاسم بالخفض نحو بزيد، فزيد اسم مخفوض بالباء. I don't say ببي، you say بالباء. ومثال اختصاص الفعل بالجزم نحو لم يقم، فيقوم فعل مضارع مجزوم بلم. وهذه الأنواع أربع علامات أصول. Right here, the word أصول is a صفة, like primary. Right, and it's going to go, and then علامات فروع, secondary signs. We'll go into this inshallah ta'ala next week. So this is kind of just all introduction structure already. We haven't really got into grammar proper yet. Okay, وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.